Hi to all our Blitzkrieg Pop listeners on Shades Radio. Thanks for tuning in. Today on the show, we have a very special guest, Rémi Pépin. And, how do we know each other? I think it will become clearer as we chat. But yeah, we met each other some decades ago in Paris. 4 decades, in different circumstances, but mostly around a radio show called Dernière Heure. Because at that time, Rémi was playing bass in a band called Guernica, and we reconvened through mutual friends in Dublin under the strangest of circumstances, some 4 decades later, of course. But this is a story that's way too complicated to tell and not really linked to music. But then, because Rémi is living in Dublin and Paris, we also each wrote a piece for the Hope Collective project, Punks Listen, and now we get to the core of the matter. This is the third part of a highly subjective series on French punk. So hi Rémi, salut à toi Rémi.
Hey. Hey guys.
It's a real treat to have you as a guest on the show. And I'll just start maybe by saying again that this is the third part of a series on punk, on French punk, which I don't know how many parts there will be, but at least there'll be 3, and I think there's possibly going to be 6 or 7. But before, as they say in series, before on Blitzkrieg Pop, we had the Coronados and the influence of the freak beat, followed by a Neuro special about a record store, a Parisian record store and label. And today we actually have a musician from an actual band from that French punk era. So welcome, Rémi. And first of all, maybe you'd like to introduce yourself to our listeners. Who are you? The enigmatic Rémi.
Well, I'm still wondering who I am. So, you've said almost everything. I used to play in Guernica back in the days, in between 78, 79, until 84. We used to also working around graphic design, paintings, and organizing shows. The independent way, mostly because that was the main point, to be independent. And then since then, I still play in bands, but not just for the fun, not doing gigs and everything. And I'm a graphic designer. I'm a freelance graphic designer, and I'm living in between, as you said, between Paris and Dublin. That's the most of it.
Yeah, and you wrote a very interesting book. Not translated yet, but maybe one day, called Rebelle, une histoire de rock alternatif. So maybe we could translate it as Rebels, a history of alternative rock. It's kind of an encyclopedic book about the French punk of that era. So we are talking to a specialist who lived it and wrote about it. And about writing, I think you also are a writer.
Well, yeah, the thing is, the writing thing began with this book, because to go back a little bit in the past, there was 2 waves of French punk. The first wave began, as the rest of the waves in England and in the USA, in Mont-de-Marsan in 76. And there were a few bands that made singles, mostly bands like Asphalt Jungle, Metal Urbain, and so on. And we were quite young. I was born in 63, so in 77 I wasn't, and so this first wave was ended for 2 years more or less. And then there were our generation. We were listening to these bands, but we were a little bit too young to be active in it, to be a part of it. So we had our time next, in the late 70s and the early 80s. And so we began to play in bands and everything. So I think we'll get back to this later. But
yes.
One day I got a book which was called Nos années punk. a French book from a guy who was in
punk years, yes.
Yeah, but it was just between 77 and 79, and I was like, dude, where are we? So I called friends, and I was a bit pissed off. It was like, come on, we worked a lot for that. So I decided to write this book, which was a bit, it was completely out of my league. I'm not a writer, but I still don't feel like a writer. But anyway, so I began to work on it, and it's quite complicated because I'm not, I'm not a scholar, I'm not a journalist. So I had to go back down memory lane. It took me a while. It took me 2 years actually, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah. And that's very much in the spirit of what Michael Murphy was talking about, the DIY spirit of punk.
Well, it's all about punk,
And also asking other people. I think we were talking about it a little bit earlier of the importance of sharing memories with the people you lived that history with.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So I called friends mostly, and then people that I didn't know, but I've seen on stage and everything, and everybody was happy to do it. Well, And the thing is, what I still like the most about punk rock is you can do it,
Yeah, exactly.
The fact that I'm not a writer, and suddenly you decide that you're going to write something and you put the best of you in it. Maybe it will work, maybe not, but you can try to do it because nobody will stop you from doing it anyway. Exactly. So
Yeah, and I was interested. I think that the song you picked to write about for the Punks Listen is "I Want to Be Me." So maybe you'd like to talk to us about that choice for the book. We can, because I think that really determines, it really shows who you are.
No, but I come from a very French political left-wing family background. My father and mother used to be very into the whole 68 movement and everything, and my dad was very fond of music. He was a huge music fan, blues, jazz, and rock and roll. So at home we had the Stones, Hendrix, and everything. So it was, of course, gorgeous, brilliant, but it wasn't us. It was the generation before. So we had this situation to, what are we going to deal, musically speaking and politically speaking and artistically speaking and everything. So to be you, you had to find your ways, you had to find your way, and you had the best music around you, the 70s, 60s and 70s rock. So what are we going to do? And then suddenly the Sex Pistols.
And how do you think that maybe French punk changed the musical landscape in France? Do you think it had an impact on the French musical landscape, or was it just a fleeting moment in musical history?
No. It was a big change. It was a big change because there was nothing in France. But when I say nothing, it means literally nothing. No places to go and listen to live music. Everything was in big places, pretty expensive, so you couldn't go. No record labels apart from the big ones that were signing mostly mainstream things. So completely different from England, for example, where you could, we didn't have even rehearsal places. So there was nothing. And punk changed completely that, of course, because you wanted to play music, you wanted to play rock and roll, so you had to find ways. So you had to open places to play music. That's what we did later. We literally opened places, squats, mostly.
I think we'll talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But the thing is, what French punk changed for music in France, was mostly the way to listen to music. There were radios with in 81 when the socialists became government, the
Got
socialist
into government, yes.
Yeah, when Mitterrand was elected, we had the free radio, so you had a place to play your music. You had places to be interviewed by people like you, and we decided to grab the DIY philosophy and do things. So we made fanzines, we opened places for gigs, and blah blah blah. So I think that's what, and there is also the French complex with rock and roll, because French doesn't sound good that much. And every time the rock comes to France, we make a mockery out of it.
Yeah, and maybe
for a while, French punk rock was supposed to be Plastic Bertrand.
Yes.
Come on.
Yeah.
Please. So,
Yeah, I mean, I clearly remember going to, I think it was your grandfather's place in Montreuil. Was it your grandfather's to see you rehearse?
No, my parents. That was my parents.
In Montreuil.
Yeah, in Montreuil, yeah.
Yes, I remember going to with Michel, going to see you rehearse was it the cellar or a garage?
No, well, it's a funny story. My mom was at the moment, she was a teacher in primary school, and so we were living in a school. So it was the basement of the school.
Of the school, right. I mean, I think we came to see you rehearse about twice, but it was quite, and again, going places was also always a kind of an adventure, because the places were not always in Paris.
Yes, well, that's the other part of it. It's the being into punk rock in France, in Paris. Well, I'm just can talk about Paris because I'm from there. And I wasn't from Paris. I was from the suburbs of Paris. And being a young punk, being 15 or 16, wearing the leather jacket and everything, the gear and blah, 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 it meant that you were on the streets. And there were already people on the streets. And these guys, they were working class guys, tough guys. And they were like, what are you guys doing here? This is our territory. This is our place. So mostly teddy boys, rockers. So it was going from a place to another was kind of, it was an adventure because you could meet plenty of different people. Then the skinheads later, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah.
Do you remember Marco from Wunderbar?
Yes, I do.
And I remember him saying, to wear a leather jacket, you have to be able to defend it.
Oh, yeah.
So that was, yes.
Yeah. Even the shoes.
And the shoes, So it just brings me to a little bit, we're just going to go a little bit outside. Do you think that the punk movement was in France? Was it something that brought people together? Or was it something which is more kind of politically divisive? Because I think we touched on, maybe the skins and so on, the skinheads and so on. So do you think it had, and we'll talk about the Cascada, the squats quite soon after, because I think that's linked to the politics. Could you talk to us a little bit about what you think the politics of French Parisian punk was about? Because I think even in the countryside or the other parts of France, it was quite different. I think Paris...
The thing is, the French punk came on the end of leftism, of extreme leftism in France. There was 68 movement, and then there were plenty of young guys and wondering what to do next or something like that. In the politically speaking, extreme left wing, I mean. So there was this kind of, the guys were called les autonomes, which were kind of the end of the radical left wing movement. We had Action Directe also was still in action at the moment, and they were like, it was les années de plomb in Germany and in Italy. So there was this whole, extreme left wing kind of movement mixed with a lot of drugs, which was complicated too. And to be honest, French punk was mostly middle class, a bit different from England, where it was very mixed. You had middle class, but you also had working class people, and they were all together in the thing, and they were not that much. It wasn't that much ideological in the beginning. Punk rock was about listening to loud rock and enjoying yourself and being yourself by going to gigs and dressing up and everything. But in France, very, very soon in the beginning, it was mixed with politics and extreme left-wing politics. To say that it would bring people together, I don't know. Music was bringing people together.
Yeah.
That was the thing that grouped people. And plus, to be honest, we were into politics, but not very clever about it. We haven't read Lenin or Trotsky or Bakunin. So it was kind of a very DIY way of making politics. Well, the thing is, we weren't talking much about politics, but we were kind of making political things.
Yeah, the movement had a political nature.
Yeah, that was kind of the punk ethos too, Like
yes.
Stop talking and start making things, doing things.
So, I think now is a good time to talk about the squat scene in Paris, because as we said, it was kind of linked to that kind of left political movement. And I think maybe it was something that was very specific to Paris for a couple of years. So I really would like you to talk to us, first of all, maybe how Guernica fits into the Parisian punk movement, but also how Guernica and other bands found this kind of avenue to express themselves, and what, how it was like. What was the experience like? Where was it? Who were the bands? All this juicy stuff.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, again, there was nowhere to play, nowhere to stay. We used to hang out on stairs in Luxembourg or in Les Halles. There were two record shops, in the beginning, which one was called, we have to go a little bit back. The first record shop was opened by a guy called Marc Zermati, who died like a few years ago. And it was called the Open Market. And it was the kind of the proto-punk, you could find the Stooges, the MC5, blah, 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 the whole, but again, we were too young for this. So we had the beginning of the second wave. So it was these two places. One was called Music Box, and it was on the 6th district, left bank of the La Seine. So again, an adventure for a guy living in the suburbs. And the other was called Haricot Vert, which is kind of a not funny joke, in Les Halles, which was the other main place and was beginning to be and was going to be the main place for punk rock and fights for a few years. So we used to, we were hanging out on the streets, in record shops, doing mostly nothing. So when we began to play music, we had to find places to play. That was the main thing, you were rehearsing and you wanted to make gigs because that's what punks were supposed to do. DIY, you play, you make a gig, you make a record. So we began by playing in this kind of places like MJC, which is a very French thing. It is kind of places for youngsters in the suburbs. And there was La Fête de la Musique, a few things, but it wasn't enough. And most of the time, the sound was completely crappy. It wasn't good that much. There was a few clubs like Le Gibus, which is a kind of a legendary club, but most of them were pretty pricey. And most of them were owned by people who weren't, you didn't want to mess with these guys. They were kind of night mafia and everything. So the whole thing wasn't cool enough for us. It was complicated. So eventually we hung out in the poorer districts of Paris, of course, because that's where, things happen.
Things happen,
yes. So we went into, we hung out in Belleville, Ménilmontant, the east of Paris, which still is the nicest place and the funniest place.
And probably most authentic. as well.
Yeah, exactly. Still, it's changing a lot. There's a bit of gentrification, but and we met through a radio, an anarchist radio called Radio Libertaire. We met guys who met guys, and we ended up meeting the squatters from the Belleville. And there was this guy called Mickey, who was a punk rocker coming from Nice, and he ended up in a squat. He wasn't that much into politics, but it happens that he ended up in a super left-wing squat with plenty of guys close to the autonomy movement, so really, really engaged into politics in plenty of ways, which I won't detail now. And they were nice guys, and they said, well, we're opening places, so if you want to play, no problem, because it will make people come to our, so we said, all right, brilliant, no problem, playing in a squat is good, cool. But they kind of question our political views about things. We had to pass a little bit of an exam. So the thing was, suddenly you were 15 or 16, and you had to have, you had to question yourself about the way you were practicing. You were dealing with the audience. Most of these gigs were free. You could
good
pay.
French existentialist practice.
Yeah, it's kind of. Yeah, it was. It's
yes.
History repeating. It was kind of a very close to the Provost movement in Holland, or the situationists and early extreme left wing in the 60s and everything. So it was kind of. You had to be. There is this saying in French, but I can't translate it. But you'll have to. It's if you're speaking about revolution without put it in practical every day, you have a dead corpse in your mouth. So it was kind of, you want to do things, do it, the proper way. So pay no more than for a gig, pay no more than for a record, blah blah blah. Plenty of things like that.
Like the people in England, the crass.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. But we didn't know crass. The anarcho-punk scene. We didn't know at all at the moment.
No links.
No, absolutely no lead. There were leads afterwards with the Hollands, the X, Red Alerts, and all the Dutch, and then the English punk scene. We made Zounds came to play in France, and UKDK and all these, left wing
people. We kind of don't speak enough about, when we review, we kind of, so many bands have, are left in the shadows, so to speak. But would you, for example, give us a typical lineup of a concert, and maybe talk to us about how a concert ended in the
Well, the thing is,
Palicao was a little bit more organized, I think.
But there were two big places in next to the Métro Couronne, which is in the heart of Belleville and Ménilmontant. So there were two places. One was a real squat. It was Les Cascades. It was kind of a garage or parking, underneath a building. And the other, so it was completely, not allowed. And the other was a place that wasn't a squat, but definitely looked like a squat, which was called Palicao. And it was, there were artists that were dealing with the place, and you had to not only come to play music, but you had to have an artistic point of view. And as we were in Guernica and in Berrier Noir and all these bands and Lucrat Milk, that was the gang. We were into music, but also into paintings and graphics and everything. There was this French. There was also a first wave of punk graphics in the late 70s with a gang of guys and called Bazooka Production. who used to work at Libération. So, well, whatever. So the lineup, the thing that is playing in Belleville was playing in poor districts. So you had the squatters, the punks, but you had everybody else living there, and it was really poor, really, buildings were really dirty, old, and falling apart and everything. And there was a lot of drugs. So you had to be very careful. So,
yes.
and as it was completely under the radar, of the police and everything. Well, lucky enough, the police didn't come because they were like, we don't care. It's mostly Arabs and young thugs, and we don't give it up. So they came a few times, but not that much in the beginning. In the end, they fired everybody and cleaned the whole district. But in the beginning, there was kind of this freedom feeling. You could do almost everything you wanted. The guys around living there or dealing drugs didn't want problems, so they were like, you do your things, we do our things, and that's fine with us. It was kind of this kind of feeling. So a gig could be perfect or a complete disaster or a mix of both.
And I think you weren't really looking as bands. You weren't really looking to be paid in money, really. I think maybe,
or being paid.
Or maybe you were. Maybe it was. Maybe just just were you really doing it for free? Or.
Well, the thing is, the entrance was you pay what you want. That was the feeling of it. So the only guy who got paid was the guy with the PA.
Yes,
and it was always the same guy. In the beginning, he didn't get paid that much. He was super nice and very patient because we were. I think we could be a real pain in the arse. The whole of us. Louder! I can't hear my guitar. Blah blah blah. And the guy had to set the gear in the middle of a squat with people, whatever, So it was kind of very messy. So no, we didn't get any money ever from what we were doing. The thing was, we all worked in like a crappy job. I used to be a delivery boy. I sold things in the BHV and blah, blah, blah. You made money to buy gear, to make records. We were young, we were between 16 and 22. So you don't have the, a few issues that you have afterward. Yeah. And, we were completely in the real world.
Yeah.
But that was better.
It brings me to talk about, there are a few legends, people, big personalities of the French scene. And, you were talking about equipment, and the first person I'm thinking of is Elno, because we brought Les Coronados and Beru to Ireland. Back, I think it was in 1980. I can't remember. Anyway, the whole thing was something else. The building got destroyed. Elno went through a big big bay, a glass window. But anyway, I don't think they got paid. I think the trip got paid by Mick McCohan, who we'll talk to one day. A friend of Michael Murphy and a student of mine, if you can believe it. But anyway, so there were big personalities. I'm thinking about Elno, but really, I'm thinking about Marsu.
Yeah, of course.
People like Lydie.
Yes, of course. But the thing is,
Aline, because
absolutely,
had an impact, and they weren't involved in playing in bands.
No. They were involved in plenty of essential things for us, like fanzines, like radios, and everything. The thing is, the Johnny Rotten, we're not into music, we're into chaos. So the thing was to find ways to organize a little bit of this whole chaos, because when I wrote the book, I was like putting things into boxes, they in 1981 that happens, we made this gig, blah blah blah, and everything looks like very nice and clean in the book, but it was a complete mess because plenty of people were into drugs and girls and fights and blah blah blah. So there you go. So yeah, there were figures like, everybody found things that they could do. So if you were into press, you made a fanzine. So that's what Lydie did. She had a radio show, Lydie, but she was called, her nickname was Barbarian.
Yes.
In Libération and at France Inter later. But in the beginning, she made a fanzine called Burning Rome. And she got in touch with the squatters, and the squatters got in touch with radio guys, and a guy like Marsu, which is still a very good friend of mine, was Mr. Manager of everybody and nobody. He was writing in this kind of fanzine called New Wave, which was a big one of the first fanzine in France, and was really helping the scene. But there were guys doing radio shows on Radio Libertaire, a guy called Thierry, Visa, and Yves, and then suddenly they make this cassette record label, so they were taping the groups and selling the tapes, and they had the radio show, we had fanzine, so the whole thing built up with plenty of super nice people and completely messy people, like also Elno was one of these guys, but there were plenty of Elnos everywhere. So it was kind
of his brother, Elno and his brother.
Yeah, Ritier, yeah. We're still living in Paris at the moment. Yeah. So you had to. It was a mix between the being young and listening to music and discovering the whole. What goes with it, know.
I was going to ask you. Yeah, sorry. Go on.
And organizing yourselves. So so there were plenty of boys and girls, because girls were really active in the scene too. There were Lucrat Milk. The band had this completely crazy singer, Nina, who was amazing on stage. Lydie was on radio and making her fanzine. Our manager was Aline, and she was a super good friend of us. Laurence Verfaille, plenty of boys, girls working hard to make things possible. That was the idea.
And to me, because I didn't really pursue the musical scene for such, it's always, to me, from the outside, it's always a miracle to see that people actually managed to keep on doing what they liked, because the economic conditions of that time for us, for the youth of our age, I'm a little bit older than you, I'm 5 years older than you, we did not have that many great prospects. So it's very consoling to see it. I really like to see people like yourself and Marsu and Laurence and, well, Aline is now retired, but like to see people are still doing what they like. And now I have a little bit more time, so I'm going back to it. But maybe now is a good time to talk to us about Guernica. What music you produced, and maybe even to tell us that you're still working at this project, and how?
It's a funny coincidence. There will be a vinyl of what we did back in the day next spring. So that's funny, because we met together again, and we had to remix the tunes, and we also found a live video of one of the first gigs of Berrurier Noir and Guernica. In 83, so exactly 40 years ago. Well, Guernica, the thing is, we began to play because we wanted to play punk rock, because it was easy, you 3 chords, and there you go, 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah. So in the beginning, Guernica came from a few bands. There were a few bands before, always with my brother. My brother was the drummer, and I was the bass player. So we were the rhythm section, and we were brothers, and we were good.
Drum and bass.
So we could at least hold the chaos together, which was good. If you have a good rhythm section, you're almost saved, then you can let the guitarist play and make his show. But the thing was that, so we began in really, I think the first band we made was in 77. So my brother was super young, but he was, so then, and then there were a few bands before we ended up creating Guernica, which was, I'd say in maybe around 81. And at that moment, we were into post-punk, English post-punk mostly, like Killing Joke, Theater of Hate, all these kind of, really heavy sound bands and everything. So we had this lineup. There was, we were 5 of us, my brother on drums, my friend Mathieu was playing percussions, timbales, and more drums. We wanted drums, and bass, like Killing Joke. The thing is, the sound engineer in France didn't have the same feeling, they didn't have a clue about Killing Joke, and so they were always making you this kind of small sound, very nice and cozy, but we wanted to sound like heavy shit, like boom, like a bombing.
And we will listen to Guernica's tracks, of course. Yes.
Okay.
First.
So that was the thing. So we were into all these English bands, mostly post-punk, still listening to the first wave, like the Pistols, the Damned. I'm a huge Clash fan, because that was the first punk gig I ever saw. I was in the Bataclan, which used to be my favorite venue for gigs until, very sad events. But I saw the Clash in '77, and it not very original, but it changed my life. So we were trying to do that, this kind of mix between rock and tribal. We also listened to the Slits, the pop group, plenty of reggae, because there's
a lot of funk kind of
exactly
influence in your music,
kind of noisy, strange funk, very political at the moment in England. The pop group was really, and so there was this weird mixture, and that's something that we all mostly forgot. Rock and roll, rockabilly, pub rock, but rockabilly a lot, So it was kind of a mixture of plenty of things. It was a very rich period, musically speaking.
And I think we're going to talk about your playlist now, but maybe before we talk about your playlist and maybe a few words, what you want to show us, basically. Maybe you could tell us, which band do you think you were the closest to? Which other bands were you the closest
you mean on
the scene? Yes.
At this moment?
So, yes,
that's very
if you were playing in a lineup.
That's very easy. The 2 bands that we were friends with were this band called Lucrat Milk and the other called Berrurier Noir. And eventually our guitar player left to join Berrurier Noir, and they had success and we didn't. So, but no, it was obviously friendly things, all these guys were friends. So these 2 were the closest to us, but there were plenty of others. There were a band called MKB.
Yes.
Fraction Provisoire, with a guy called Ossan, who is a filmmaker. So did the MKB, what again? Les Maîtres, plenty of bands. The scene was quite. Suddenly there were, you were coming from the late '70s where there were no bands, and suddenly there were 25 bands. Bands like Les Vampas who are still active now. Even if Didier is retiring. I don't know. Ludwig. Oh no, they weren't. They were a bit later. That was like 85, 84, 85. But the early band was
Oberkampf, these people as well.
Yeah, Oberkampf, Parabellum, so many.
So I know you've prepared a playlist for us, and maybe you'd like to talk a little bit about this. You know, how did you make your choice, and what was your purpose in showing us the bands, the people?
A very scholar way chronologically, So
Yeah,
it's like the first tunes are mostly early French punk. I might even I'm not done completely with the playlist, so I'm still working on it. But there is like proto punk and French punk, early French punks, bands like Gasoline, Asphalt Jungle, Metal Urbain, Stinky Toys, blah blah blah, and then, well, kind of our generation, which was like Guernica, but also Berrurier Noir, and then all these bands, Lucrat Milk again, the Brigades. My memory is like,
Oh,
but
yeah, yeah.
all these bands, Vae Victis, Ashguanei Wudei, blah blah blah. There is so many, and
so
then
diverse, so
yeah, it
diverse.
is.
Yes.
The Thugs who signed on Sub Pop, a band from Angers, Les Thugs, and then there were
They were on Euros, weren't they, as well?
I don't know if they were on Euros. I'm not sure. Maybe so. I don't know. Couldn't tell. Charles de Gaulle,
Yes.
which was written Charles de Gaulle. Well, there you go. And then in the end of it, the band that remained, that signed on big record labels like La Mano Negra, Les Négresses Vertes, Noir Désir,
The people who got commercial fame.
Yeah, that was the end of it.
Yes.
This kind of phenomenon ended for like 5 or 6 years, because after all the chaotic birth of the thing, we got organized, and record labels were built. Like there was already Euros, but there was this big one called Bondage Records, it was Marsu, again, the guy we talked about before, a guy called Philippe Baya, who was making money by selling pirate records mostly. Now I can tell. And then the third guy was this guy still called Kid Loco, who used to be called Kid Bravo back in the days, and used to play in a band called the Brigades. And the three of them built this record labels, and the spirit of it was you get money to make a record, you sell it, you get the money, and you make another record. So that's what they did, and they became quite big at the moment because of Berrurier Noir, who began to sell records, which was completely new to us. Selling records was not even an option. You sold records to your friends, to the audience that you had, and then you made another one. But then suddenly Berrurier Noir became really big, really, really big, because they were selling like
and they were playing the big venues.
They had to play in big venues because otherwise you couldn't. The public was coming suddenly. They were kids younger than us. They were 13 or 14. So that's another story, funny story. So as they were getting big, we were used to violence. We were used to the skinhead violence. We were used to the problem with the extreme right wing, which was growing up very fast in France at the moment. Unfortunately, we were kind of the first European country to have an extreme right wing growing very fast.
Yes.
And the skinhead thing was full on. So we had plenty of skinhead problems coming to our places and fights. And, these guys were not all of them, because the first skinhead wave was mostly young guys hanging out, fighting, obviously, but, no political issues especially. But in the early 80s, it became very political because the National Front came close to this guy and, using them as, So when Berrurier Noir became big, we still had problems with the skinhead scene and the extreme right-wing scene. And so they had to find ways to protect the public. It wasn't to protect the musicians. We knew how to deal with this kind of shit. But you had to protect the audience because there were plenty of young kids, 13 or 14 years old, and you couldn't, threw them into the lion's den, So they made this, so they recruited, friends, mostly
Service d'ordre.
Service d'ordre, yeah. What, don't know the
Stewards, it's a stewards, yes.
Yeah, the thing that we fought against for ages because we couldn't stand,
Yes, order.
But order wasn't into our plan. So but they had to build it to protect the audience because the audience was,
it's quite amazing when you hear them sing, la jeunesse.
Oh Jesus, yes. We're so far from this today.
We're so far from this today.
Yeah, la jeunesse emmerde le Front National. Well, the youngsters are now voting, not all of them, but a lot of them are voting for the National Front at the moment, which is very sad. Of course.
And I think we're bringing this interview to a close. You said so many good things. Just maybe a last question, Rémi. Do you still listen to music, and what do you listen to?
Oh, that's another show. I listen to music all the time. So I'm listening to plenty of different things. Obviously, old stuff, of course, but plenty. The thing that blew my mind recently is a French band actually, and it's called Astéréotypie. And
I'll have to check them out.
Oh yes, you absolutely have to. They're autistic people, and they made this band. It was kind of a therapy organized by their therapist in a center for autistic people, and the band is amazing. And these guys are amazing. The singer, this girl is so plenty. But I'm also listening to music from other parts of the world, plenty. Irish bands too.
Yes.
Like the Fountains DC and the plenty of others, music is a huge part of my life.
Yeah. So that hasn't changed.
Nope.
No, and you still go to gigs as well.
Here, mostly. Not that much in France, a little bit, but it's easy. It's still easier to go to gigs here, In
Dublin, yes.
Yeah, it's so.
Ireland, yeah.
You hang out, you go to Whelan's, you go to the wherever, and it's easy. You have a drink, you go inside, and it's In France, you still have to book your tickets online and blah blah blah.
Yes.
Well, it changed a lot. It's really better now, but
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Rémi.
Well, thank you.
Looking forward to listen to your playlist, and thank you again. And hopefully you'll come to talk again about, I'm sure there will be topics that we want to talk again, because I feel I think there's another program about which we didn't really talk about, we did talk about the squats, and I think that was the big thing we wanted to talk about, but the whole scene, I think I'd like to come back on the, all the different things that, the bars and,
absolutely.
The exhibitions, because it's such a multimedia movement in France, I feel, not just musical.
Just when I remind now of this period, when I remember this period, it was so diverse, so rich. That was the main thing, because you had punk rock, but you had industrial music, you had rockabilly, psychobilly, ska, reggae, blah blah blah. It was so rich. That was the was good fun.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, Rémi. Merci.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll talk to you again at some stage, maybe this year or later.
Anytime.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.